We're back.
We're back.
Law 12 from the Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. We're now at Law 12 of 18.
Yep. Crazy.
All right. This one, Law 12 is to reconnect to the masculine or feminine within you. The law of gender rigidity. Reconnect with the masculine or feminine within you. The law of gender rigidity.
Yeah. It
So, this one was an interesting one to get into, right?
is.
A lot of he really gets into the psychology of you as a child, your connection to your mom, right? So the boy that has a connection to the mom, the little girl that has the connection to the father,
Right.
and or I guess a father-like figure in their life.
Yeah, and I see it
It
in
was
my
interesting.
grandkids. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. What are your thoughts on this? Do you?
You know, I actually agree with this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because he takes us back to the old days, right? When there were kings and queens and stuff like that. And the woman's role was very, very, very limited. Okay. And he uses this young lady, Katerina Sparta, to
Sforza.
Sforza, and to make um, an example of, because her it, for these girls they were taught to uh, fight with swords. They were taught to um, hunt. They were taught to do military things like javelin throws and swords. So, um, that wasn't the norm back then. The norm back then was that the woman would grow up and get married and have children and please her husband, sort of thing. As much as people wanna, you know, be displeased with that, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And so it was an experiment that the father did with the girls, and the girls came, especially Katarina, um, she turned out to be a force to reckon with.
Now the father did this. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was done to kind of as a pawn. He used his daughter to grow alliances,
He did. Um,
and that was very common
that
back
was
then.
very common.
They would marry you to the son of somebody or whatever the case, and
Yeah, to unite, let's say, two colonies or kingdoms or something of that nature to make one, or villages, make that village stronger because now they were united by blood. And normally when they married, the children would come. So those offsprings would be the heads of that bigger unity of lands
mm-hmm.
and whatever it was. So yeah, but what I'm getting at is, I see it in my own grandkids. For example, I'm tinkering with cars now, and I want to show my granddaughter, and she says, "Oh no, no, I'm not interested in that because I'm a girl." And I go, "But girls do, tinker with motors too." And I don't want her to be limited in her mind, right? And so I showed her a couple of videos from Instagram where these girls are taking apart huge, V8 engines and stuff like that. And she goes, "Oh." So I'm not trying to guide her in one way. What I'm trying to show her is, look, you can do whatever you want,
Right.
you know? But in those days, that was not the case. In fact, in the example that he cites, he says that Robert Greene says, the men were captivated by Catarina Sforza, and they were captivated because she could talk about military strategies, she could talk about politics, she was good with the sword, she was an excellent horse rider, she was a hunter, she was taught how to hunt. So there were a lot of things that they had in common with her
Mm-hmm.
that was not the norm for the time. And so I find that to be very interesting because I do see some gender specific things even today.
Oh yeah.
Even today.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up your granddaughter. I wonder where that came from, where she says, "Oh, working on cars, I'm a girl." That's not, girls don't do that. I
Yeah, I
wonder
don't.
where that came from because you're not born, I don't think, with that.
No, you're not.
What you are born with is sometimes you could be born with maybe being more in touch with your feminine side or your masculine side. I mean, we saw it as kids growing up. There was always the girl, I mean, you would call him a tomboy,
Right.
right? The girl in elementary school that liked playing with the boys and getting, dirty, and that was the tomboy. They were hanging with the guys kind of
Yeah.
thing. So that's something that I don't know if either they learned it from maybe their father or older brothers or something, or maybe it was just in them that they liked more the adventurous side, risked side versus playing with dolls or something that's seen as more the feminine side.
Right. I think to an extent is a learned behavior
Yeah.
because, okay, it is and it isn't. Okay. Because there is a feminine side to the ladies, right? And there is a masculine side to the guys. So, but if, for example, on Instagram, the videos I'm seeing, the dad is a motor muscle car type of guy, right? And that's what he's into. So that's what they're watching. So these little girls are, taking, they got drills and things and they're taking the motors apart. That's what they're seeing. That's what they're learning, right? Um, so to a certain extent, like if you are born in the house of a surgeon, you might have a tendency to go for medicine. If you're born in the house of an engineer, you might, because I think it's in the early years what they see
Yeah.
to a certain extent. And then, of course, is the intrinsic that you're talking about,
What are
right?
you born with?
That you're born with.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. Um, what did you think about? Oh, well, one thing actually I thought was very interesting before we move on. Caterina Sforza, she, d- Robert Greene talked about multiple instances where she caught the people off guard because of how courageous she was and brave, let's say.
hmm,
And there was one instance where they were trying to, they had kidnapped her children,
six of them.
six children, and she had escaped and was now, I guess, behind the castle walls.
Yes,
And these assassins come and they brought the children and they have the I guess the knife to the kids,
right.
and they're gonna kill the children.
Right, unless she opened up the castle and allowed them to capture her.
Right. And she said something along the lines of, go ahead and do it. When the assassins threatened to kill her children, she said, go ahead and do it. Uh, and what her reasoning was that if they would have really wanted to kill the children, they would have done it a long time ago. They would have killed her and the children. But that's not really what they were going for. I guess they were trying to capture her and gain power somehow. And so she called their bluff, essentially, and they were caught off guard. They didn't end up killing the children,
Correct.
and she bought enough time where the reinforcements came and they were safe. Now, her life ended up not going all that well. She was eventually
Captured
captured and tortured, and you know,
and put in jail for a year, which weakened her tremendously, and she ended up passing because of that year of being in jail and torture and not eating well and so forth, and so it affected her, and she died shortly thereafter.
eventually it
But
caught up to her.
look, she was exposed to one of the largest libraries in the entire world. And she was given free rein to go into that library, which was the castle library, and read whatever she wanted and explore whatever she wanted. And at the same time, the father was making sure that she wasn't weak. Weak in the sense that she was taught to fight, she was taught military strategy, She was taught how to use a bow and an arrow. She was taught how to use a sword. Um, she was taught political. So she had a private tutor, by the way, okay, which is a very famous man. I forget his name right now. And so this is not a young lady that was, hiding under a rock or exposed to very little in her early childhood. She was exposed to a ton of stuff. And that brain grows and flourishes when you're giving it all that nutrition of information. It's food for the brain. It's a wonderful thing to do to a kid. The rest of the world was stuck in this rigidity, right? Oh, you're a girl. Well, then you're supposed to learn to
These are the
cook. And,
roles.
right, these roles. And
Yeah,
he says it. He says, all of us have a rigidity, whether we are men or women. And there are qualities that sometimes are genetics, okay? And sometimes is influenced by the parent of the opposite sex. He
right.
says that. He quotes that,
Yeah.
you know? And I think it's very interesting.
Like the father that's into let's say vehicles and cars and stuff, the daughter is going to be potentially interested in some of those things,
Influenced by that.
influenced by them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of the opposite, right? So then, so what he was saying is that, and a lot of this he credits Carl Jung in the psychology and a
Yes.
lot of the things behind this, where he gets into this idea of this idea that we have something called a an anima and an animus within us, and they're interesting concepts. But real quick, you reminded me when you were talking about Katerina Sforza, that one story, the biblical story, and I don't remember it exactly, I don't know if you do, where it was two ladies claiming to be the mother of a child,
Right.
and I think the
Solomon.
King Solomon was
Yes.
going to kill one of was going to kill the
No, what happened was that they were fighting and they were saying, this is my child, this is my child, this is my child. And they brought it to a group of judges and they couldn't figure out who was to which. And so Solomon was all wise. And so they brought that big problem to Solomon because these were apparently important women. Or anyway, they bring the child and the two women to Solomon and he says, "Look, we have this problem." She says he's the mother. She says he's the mother, and we just can't figure it out. And Solomon says, "Okay, no problem." And so he straight out asked them, and they kept the same song and dance. And so he says, "Okay, I want you to kill the child." And all of a sudden, one of them popped up and said, "No, no, no, she's the mother." The other one kept saying, "I'm the mother, I'm the mother." But one of them popped up and said, "No, no, no, she is the mother. Give the child to her."
Wow.
Okay? And Solomon said, "Okay, give the baby to the lady that said that it's not." Because she would rather, okay, lose her child to herself than to have the child be put to death because that is the love of a mother. It,
Wow.
it transcends everything. And so she would have rather, okay, I'd rather lose him. She's gonna raise him. That's fine, but please don't kill my child. And so, it's a good story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah, those are things that it just like the motherly instinct,
Right, you
right?
don't want your child to be hurt.
I think my wife was sharing a story with me. It was about I think it was a lion cub that the mother had the cub, I think, in the mouth and threw her into an area thinking that it was grass or something, but it ended up being some sort of river.
Oh,
And so you immediately see the mother lion notice that what it had done, and like in a panic try to save the cub. And I think that it did save the cub. Somehow it was able to grab it before it was taken away. But it's like that's just the instinct, that's innate. That's nature.
yeah,
And it's not only human nature, it's also you see it in
in
animals
animals.
in the wild, right?
Oh, you do.
You know, we're
There's
not that far removed. I'm sorry. We're
no, no,
not that
no,
far removed from wild animals ourselves.
no. We're not. No, we're
When
not.
you really look at what makes us tick and the nature in us. Go ahead, sorry.
And without getting too controversial, and we're getting off the topic, but there's some animals that exhibit more compassion and more understanding
Hmm.
than some of us as humans. Because some of the things that we do to each other are barbaric and brutal. And the animals, if you stop to think about it, you know, they kill to eat, they kill to survive, you know?
Yeah.
So,
For the most part. For the most part. I mean, I've I was watching a documentary, Chimp Empire,
oh,
and they did say that the chimps, almost like a ritual. It's a rare occasion, but they did hunt a monkey, not for food. It was more for sport.
well,
But that's a I think a rare instance.
well, it may not be, Mike, because it's a hierarchy thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, the
And
chimps are very much like us. I mean, if you want to learn about humans, look at Chimp Empire.
yeah, and so now Chimp Empire, is that a movie or
It's
a
a Netflix I guess it's a
series?
documentary, a
Oh,
series. Yeah.
I need
Excellent
to see
series.
that. You've brought that up several times.
What happens is that these chimps are slightly different in the sense that they grew up with cameramen and scientists and people always being around. So what they're saying is they've been acclimated, so they are not spooked off by the people. Of course, they keep a distance, but the people that are filming know the chimps see them there and they still act in their natural way for the most part. Is the argument behind why these chimps are you're able to see so
I've seen a
much.
little bit. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It
But there's
is.
hierarchy everywhere.
There is
Like for example, you see it in lions in the pride when the older lion gets older and older,
the male
the male.
dominant lion.
Yeah, there's a younger one that comes up and fights him,
Yeah,
and
challenges.
depending on the timing, if the old guy is old, it gets defeated, and you know,
Yeah, yeah. His time is up.
his time is up.
This morning we're making one of our runs, and we see two men. We're talking about the gender, masculine and feminine. You see two men having it out, and I said, "Look at those guys! They're in a verbal argument, right?" And they
They were
were
at a 7-Eleven, and we think that they were fighting over a parking space, right?
don't know. It could have been road rage, who knows what. But the point is that they were at a distance, maybe what would you say,
10 feet away?
15 feet,
Yeah,
10,
10
15
feet away.
feet from each other, but they're really yelling at each other. But then one of the people in the argument, one of the men begins to go behind his car, his SUV, and he's still yelling at the other guy. Other guy's yelling at him, but then he ends up getting in his car, still yelling at the other guy. And you're saying get out of there already.
Yeah, we
Don't.
were at a red light. That's
And
why we were able to watch the whole thing.
you're telling the guy he ends up flipping him off, the one that was not in the car.
Right.
He's flipping him off, and he's kind of like, but he's still keeping his distance.
Right, but that guy wanted him to get out and fight
Yeah, that's what it
because
seemed
he
like.
kept going, you're blah 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 blah, with your all you are is talk. Come on, come on.
Right.
So
And so what ends up happening is the guy who gets in the SUV and takes off, um, we to me that person is to me that person's the smarter of the two because he diffused a potential altercation. Now maybe
he
some
is
things are worth fighting for, and you really have to fight.
not a parking spot.
Whatever, yeah, it didn't seem
I
like
don't
in
I don't know what they were fighting about.
we don't, but that could have escalated very quickly. And
Oh,
in this chapter, one of the things that Robert Greene talks about is even he talked about that samurai that wrote a very famous book, Mitsushi.
yeah.
I don't remember his name, not Mitsushi, but he talked about time and distance before attacking, and he says one of the things that this samurai said that one of the things that helped him to defeat the opponent was to tire the opponent out. You give that person the space where they tire themselves out, and then you come in and you finish them. And as opposed to immediately reacting, and let's say that's the more masculine side, is to attack and try and be dominant, and but that's not necessarily what will win the battle or the war, and the war, let's say. And I thought that was interesting.
It is.
um Sometimes you have to know when to give things time, and that's what the whole chapter to me is about, is that understanding that at times you, let's say, the masculine side in you will be more pronounced, but don't be rigid, so rigid to the point that when you need to show empathy, when you want to, be emotional in a certain instance, you can let that side come out too.
Well,
That's not weakness necessarily.
well,
And that's what I got out of this
no, I
chapter.
actually disagree with you.
Okay. What did you get out of it?
Well, there's two things. We'll talk about weakness, but well, let's do it now because I kind of, because see, when he was talking about Catarina Sforza,
Hmm.
she was on her toes all her life until she fell in love with this guy. I forget his name, right? And then she was so tired at that point in time of being, uh, let's say, her
The
father's daughter,
Yeah,
right? Because she was
the
ext
dominant person.
right, extremely acute to everything that was happening to her. So she was analyzing things. She was a force to reckon with,
Hmm.
right? So she falls in love and she lets all go and just lets that. And so they say that that was a moment of weakness for her
Hmm.
to let her now new husband. She had already had 6 kids, I think. So this guy comes in late in her life, but she's tired and she allows herself to have her feminine side take over, which her, let's say, like you said, she was, what was it? Her masculine side. She was
Dominant.
dominant by nature,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so they categorize that as a weakness in the book.
Hmm.
So so that's one point. And the other thing that I wanted to bring back is that you were talking about she called the people's bluff on the kids.
Yeah.
It's because she had the ability to analyze these people and she figured that the killers were indecisive, could not make a
Yeah.
decision. They were not able to be strong enough to do this. And so she called their bluff and she tells them, I'm already pregnant anyway with another child.
That's right. That's right.
You know, like saying, even if you take these, I'm still going to have offsprings. And so they just had no idea what to do. They were out of their league and she was way
Yeah.
ahead of them. But I specifically remember reading about him calling that a weakness when she falls in love and lets everything go.
Yeah.
So I don't know,
Well,
Mike. I
no,
just
I
don't know.
I agree with you that he was saying that when you fall in love with somebody, it's pure emotion and you lose control.
Okay.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, in certain instances with gender rigidity, what I understood from it is that at times, don't like, she was going against what the gender role was at her time.
Sure was.
So at times it's knowing and not be afraid to bring out the other side that's, let's say, being suppressed. There was a chapter where we talked about the dark side that's being suppressed, right? um and you bring it out, or make light of it, bring awareness to it, and tame it like a wild, like
Wild
taming a
beast.
wild horse,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you can tame that wild horse and you can get that stride, now you're running at full speed, right? But what I understood is like the idea of the yin and the yang. I looked into it. Robert Greene didn't touch on it, but I did look into it, because this idea of the yin and the yang is that one is like fire, one is water, and balance is having both of them together, the black and the white. However, if you look at the yin and the yang sign, there's a you have
The tip.
the black, you have the black, and the white, right? But then within the black is a white circle, and within the white is a black circle.
It's very interesting.
And the idea, from what I understand of that, is that even, let's say, you have the yin is the female energy, the yang is the male energy. Um, that there's still that female energy within the other and the male energy within the other, and it's kind of that I guess balance. That's what makes everything balanced, and you have to know when to bring out the fire and when to bring out the water.
It's really interesting. And everything seems to stem back to childhood.
He, yeah, I mean,
Childhood is so important.
yeah, he connects a lot of the things to childhood. But I also, like you've mentioned, those are things that, I guess, let's say that these things did happen in childhood, and you have more influence from one side or the other, or even situations of like a suffocating mother or such a strict father,
Correct.
right? And he gets into this idea of casting onto the other person. He calls it a gender projection.
Mm-hmm.
So he talked about all these different types of six different types of people out there, that, like, why that girl is always attracted to that guy who's in trouble, right? And it's because that he's the wild side that she was, let's say, never able to um,
Explore.
explore because her parents were so strict, something along those lines. And so Robert Greene gets into all of those, and he dissects each one. And it was interesting. I was thinking in my life, where have I encountered people like this? Um, People that they try to make something work, make something fit as a couple, but there's constant fighting and friction, and eventually it falls apart,
Mm-hmm.
or, and not that any relationship is perfect. I think there's gonna always be a back and forth, but um yeah, I thought it was interesting how he brought up those different, like, I guess, stereotypical relationships or individuals that they're looking for, like the man who's looking for, like, they give the example of he gave the example of the professor, the girl that falls in love with the professor, but it ends up not being what she thought he was. He's actually not that open-minded person. He ends up being that very strict and rigid, uh father-like person.
Right.
So
That's why they say, when we were talking about the chapter that speaks about envy, you know, one of the things that they gave us an answer to, take envy down to another level or a lower level is, look, the person that you envy, try to see if you can picture yourself in their shoes for 24 hours, and you're going to see that their life is not exactly what you projected it to be. And if you knew what it was like, and the amount of work and effort and struggle that it takes to have that life, you might not want to be there. And that will reduce your level of envy and may revert you to look at yourself and say, well, what can I do with my life? How can I improve my life? But we're getting away from it. But one of the things that I thought was very cool, there's a section in the chapter where he says, look, one of the answers here is try not to be fitting into the rigidity of your gender. Try to, if you feel that this is where your life is heading, where your curiosity takes you, don't worry about the gender specific options that you have as a man or as a woman. Do as you please without caring what the rest of the world thinks. As long as with the constraints of rules and laws and regulation. You don't want to, if you feel like you're a Viking, you don't want to go beheading people, right? You got laws. But I mean, don't put yourself in like what I say a lot, don't put yourself in a portrait or in a frame,
yeah,
you know? Do what if you have a calling, whether, oh, a girl is not supposed to do this or a guy is not supposed to do this. If you have a calling, explore it, look into it,
Hmm.
because it just may be what you were meant to be in terms of fruitfulness and coming, of,
You remind me of, we just rewatched Forever Young with Mel Gibson,
uh-huh,
and this little boy likes this girl in the movie, and he asks Mel Gibson
for advice.
for advice. And Mel Gibson had, if you haven't seen the movie, he had struggled in asking his girlfriend at the time
To marry him.
hand in marriage, and the sequence of events, she ends up, he ends up in a situation where he can no longer ask her. Right? I don't want to spoil the movie if you haven't seen it, but the kid asks Mel Gibson for advice, and he's first he says just move on, right? Because he was hurt. He says just move on,
But he says, you're too young. You shouldn't be thinking about those things.
right?
You should be thinking about something else.
But then he goes back to him, and it was in the middle of the night. He wakes the kid up and he says, if you like this girl, tell her you love her, and tell her that you want everything that you feel,
Yeah,
right? How she
tells
makes you
her
feel. Tell
before
her.
it's too late.
And so that's interesting, because a lot in the dating game, and a lot of it is, a man doesn't sometimes want to show their emotional side, or doesn't want to, really tell the other person how they feel. And it was interesting because in this, Mel Gibson's kind of breaking what, let's say, the norms would be, or the gender, what's typical in the gender, and says, no, just let her have it.
Right,
Show your emotional side.
right. Well, since we've been doing a lot of Robert Greene, if you go back to one of the 48 Laws of Power,
Hmm.
um, Cesare Borgia, I think it's the guy that fell in love with, what was his name, Lola or something, and he told her about it. And the minute that she found out that it was the true love that he had for her, she completely despised him or never paid attention to him. So if you go by the 48 Laws of Power, you would not do that. Okay?
So
So,
some of these things contradict each other.
yeah, some of the things contradict each other. And what's the answer here? Who knows? But the bottom line is play the hand that you are dealt the best way you can.
I think that's what it is, because like we've been asked in several different instances, like what would you do in this situation, right? Like, because let's say one of the 48 laws says this, and then one of the laws of human nature says this, and then
Right.
one of the, and they're, it's conflicting information. And so you have to do, I think, with all the information that you have, what you think is the best choice. I don't think anyone can really tell you what that is. You have to know it.
That is correct. And I'll throw one more
Go
conflict.
with your gut,
Go
your
with your gut.
instinct.
So, you and I both play poker.
Yeah.
We're poker players.
Yeah.
The answer is do the best you can with the hand that you're being dealt.
Yeah.
And as you well know, not always the best hand wins. It depends how you play it. People get bluffed out all the time in poker.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
the best hand doesn't always win. However, if you play it to the best that you can, that's the answer.
Now, going back to the Lola and Cesare
Cesare
Borgia,
Borgia.
eh, not every woman is going to react in that way,
That's
right?
correct.
Right. So now I know Forever Young is a movie, and right, he's saying just tell her how you feel. In real life, how is that woman that you like going to react, based on the past behavior that you've seen or what you
Right,
think?
right.
You think that maybe you don't do that, right? But you let her know how you feel, at least, or whatever the case. I remember there was this idea when you were dating, when I was dating before, of being put into what's called the friend zone. And the friend zone is that you like this girl, but the girl either doesn't know that you like her because you never let her know, you never showed her, whatever the case, and she just categorizes you as, oh, this is not somebody who's like trying to become my boyfriend or take me out. This is somebody who just wants to be my friend. That's called being friend zoned.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be friend zoned, then you do have to show somehow interest in the other person. I believe.
And either get accepted or rejected.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Period. End of discussion. Now,
Um
go ahead.
it I want to talk about the midlife crisis because you've mentioned that word quite often. Robert Greene touches on it, but you were going to say something prior to.
Well, what I was going to say is we also went through the 12 Rules of Life with Jordan Peterson. Okay.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson stands by this and argues for this, that he says there's a lot of gender specific jobs that no matter how much you try to change it, you're not going to be able to accomplish a major change. And the example that he cites is most nurses are female and most engineers are male. And the reason that he says that is because he says, look, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And because of that gender difference way of thinking, they are traveling in different directions. And he says, it doesn't matter how much you want to change it. And he says, Scandinavian countries are a prime example of that, where they've tried to um, affect, let's say, gender specifics. And it goes back to the norm. And the norm being, according to Jordan Peterson, more women will choose the field of nursing and more men will choose the field of engineering. You know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. That's
According,
nature.
that's nature.
The more the caring side.
More the caring side. Women are more interested in people. Men are more interested in things.
It's very
According,
no,
it's
yeah, it's
very
very.
interesting. And look, he's got a ton of research.
Oh
This is
yeah.
a very,
They
uh,
both have done a
they,
tremendous
yeah,
amount.
yeah.
Um okay, so I'm thinking, in practical settings,
That's
I
not,
remember walk
there's people that break that rule, you know?
of course there's
Yeah,
exceptions
like the
and
ladies that I'm watching, they're taking an engine apart and putting it back together like nothing.
right, right.
So she's an
But
exception, let's
but
say.
if you look at the majority of
Yeah, yeah.
people. Now, I remember walking into some offices and it was very rigid, very structured. It was very quiet in that office. And then I remember walking into some other offices and it was a lot more free. People were joking here and there, still working, still productive, and it was a little bit more loose. The reason I'm bringing that up is because in the chapter he gets into the structure is the masculine and creativity, looseness is the feminine.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
he
that's right.
what he's saying is in different settings we have to know when, and he talked about Warren Buffett being really good at not only looking at the inside of a company but also the outside of a company. And what he means by that is that he's not only looking at the numbers, the profit, the expenses, what the company is making, but he's also looking at the people. And that's something we've talked about before. And most of, not most, but many people, many entrepreneurs or business are focused so much on spreadsheets and data that they're not looking at the people and the culture. And when I would walk into those offices that were a lot more loose, the energy was excellent and they were extremely productive. And it wasn't this idea of like, I have to be sitting here and be working all the time. No, I can joke around, I can chat, I can get up, say hi, but I know I need to get back to work and I want to be productive. And that, I think, is the combination of both the feminine and the masculine. We're structured when we need to be, but we can also let loose and have a good time. And I think that that's the magic. That's the yin and the yang. And that's what I think that um, Robert Greene is getting to. Don't be so rigid. Allow things to be a little bit more loose at
Yeah.
times.
I agree with that. I come, now that I'm older, part of my life, the beginning in business and so forth, extremely rigid. extremely rigid. I had processes, I had things that needed to be followed. I held people accountable to things, and you know, um, I'm not the guy I used to be. I'll tell you that. I fall more now into this,
Feminine.
into, well, into the looseness
Yeah.
of it because I feel that the energy is conducive to a good production.
Yeah.
You don't have to be so uh,
Militant.
militant. That's
Now,
correct.
let's talk about your midlife crisis.
Okay, let's talk about
No,
it.
because you mentioned the word multiple times. You're 65?
Yep. Yes, I
You're
am.
65.
Yep.
So, what he mentions the midlife crisis, um and I guess it's a time in your life where maybe some of the rigidity that you had, you're willing to kind of let loose a
Yep.
little bit. Is
I agree.
from what I understand of that. Like it's something that you always wanted to do, and then now you're doing it.
Right.
Right? You're letting go and finally breaking free of maybe, "Ah, I didn't do it because of this."
Well,
What's your take on that?
so I am a completely different man than I used to be when I was younger. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm a better man than I used to be. Maybe I was not all that good back then, and I'm not all that good right now.
Hopefully you're a better man.
Hopefully, you are improving, right? But as you get older, you realize you have less time on this earth, and you realize how fast life is going by you. And this is a message for everybody because some people might think this is a message for more older folks, right? But I never wanted to have I never wanted for people to figure out my next move. But people were figuring out my next move because of the rigidity that I had in business. Okay? Because I had processes in place, I had this, I wanted to reach this goal and that goal and whatever, and I was laser focused, right? Um, so I forced myself to change because I wanted to be unpredictable, right? And with this flair of unpredictability, you have to grow as a person, as a human being. You can't just change overnight. It's not like a radio station that you can actually flick it up. So it takes, again, another process. And so now you're talking about midlife crisis. What I've done is as you get older, in fact, we had a conversation this morning with a friend of ours that he says, as you get older, you need to keep your mind occupied and if you can, learn new things. And that's why I took this metal fabrication class, something that I've never done in my life. I actually fell in love with it and I started in February 1st. And here we are in November, and I've taken the class 3 times. It's gotten me into cars and tinkering with motors, and this is something that I never did before. And I'm doing that because I'm learning a lot because it's something that I have a passion for that I couldn't do before, and I'm doing it now. So my message to people out there that are planning on retiring and thinking of, sitting like Jordan Peterson says, sipping pina coladas or margaritas by the beach, that's going to get old real quick. It's going to get old very quickly.
Mm.
You need to find a reason for living. Like the Japanese say, your ikigai. You need your ikigai. You need to find something that you have a love for that gets you up in the mornings. Because when these people that have been working for 40 years, you know, they all of a sudden retire. Now, what do they do with their life? It's a big shock to the system. I have older friends of mine, and I'm telling you, this is what they're telling me, you know? And they need to find something quick, or they risk falling into a depression. So, this midlife crisis maybe hits you at what, when you're 50, when you're 40,
Yeah.
Okay, it hit me later, and I had to find something, and I did. I went out there and I started learning about cars and metal fabrication. Fortunately, I found a very good instructor and then another very good friend that has, and now it's opened all kinds of doors that, uh, you know, that I can't wait. I can't wait to get on it. I can't wait to get to the classes.
Mm.
I've taken it for 3 semesters straight. In fact, this week is the last class of this semester, and I'm thinking of joining and taking it again. So you need to find something. You need to find something. In fact, yesterday at the classic car show, there was one gentleman that said, I gotta get out because my wife and I are, you know, arguing all the time. You know, she has the list of honeydews, and I don't want to do these honeydews. And all this stuff that I'm telling you right now fits right into the laws of human nature.
Oh
Okay?
yeah,
There's laws of human nature that are recessed and, let's say, rooted in your childhood. Okay? But as you get older, the laws of human nature are going to apply again, maybe in a different fashion. But it's the whole spectrum of your life. It doesn't matter if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s. Everybody's dealing with something,
yeah,
you know? And so the answer, I think, is the hand that you've been dealt, play it the best way you possibly can. Because I cannot imagine what someone that's in a wheelchair is going through because I'm not in a wheelchair. You see? I cannot imagine what someone that's been a veteran and fought for this country and came back without his arms is going through because I have my arms, you know? But we need compassion for our human beings. Anyway,
yeah,
we got to, sorry, you asked me
yeah.
about, as you folks see, I'm having a tremendous midlife
Midlife crisis.
crisis that I'm dealing with. And
It is. Why do you think that when people get older, they become more emotional?
yeah, that's happening to me too. Yeah. Um, Mike, I think it's because things take on a different meaning because you realize that, you're not going to be around forever. Like, for example, when I was your age, I thought, you know, the guy was 50. The guy that was 50 was an old man. Okay. When I was in high school, I remember going to Bob's Big Boy. They don't exist anymore, folks. Right? There's only one left in the whole United States, or in one in California. We would go after the football games in high school. We would go to Bob's Big Boys, and I remember everybody was young, right? Every now and then there was an older couple with two little kids or three. Older meaning they were older than me because I was in high school, right? But they probably were in their 20s, 28, 29. And I remember looking at that table and saying, Psh, never. I would never. Poor guy, right? He's married, he's got three kids. Oof, forget it, it's not for me. And then as the years go by, I became the guy
At the
that
table.
was married and had three kids,
Yeah.
And I knew that when some of these young people were looking at me, I knew what they were thinking because I had been there. So as you progress in life and you get closer to what's inevitable, right? Then things take on a much fuller meaning. I'm, like forever young. I was crying like a baby, and I was trying to see that nobody would see me. You know, I'm here at the end. I'm going, oh my God, you got Pablo, get control of yourself. You got a little tear here, and the
It
problem
is an
is,
emotional movie.
it's an emotion. And you know what the problem is? When you let one tear fall, you're
You're done.
done. Everything comes. You need a handkerchief after that.
Well,
So
you're in
yeah,
touch with your feminine side, which is
I'm in
good.
very much in touch with my feminine side nowadays,
Now,
and cry for everything.
no, like even you mentioned it that your father very few times or really never said that he loved you.
Right.
It didn't mean that he didn't love you.
No, he did.
right? He did love you,
but he didn't say it.
but he didn't say it. And
No.
so, who knows? Maybe
Wait,
he
are
was,
you analyzing me, man? What's going on
well,
here?
he
I
was,
feel I'm feeling
maybe,
exposed here.
maybe he was raised that way.
Hmm.
And so, maybe he thought the gender role is you don't do that. I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning behind it was. But you definitely tell us that you love us.
All the time.
Yeah. And
Well,
so
maybe that's because my dad didn't say it to me.
maybe.
And it's like I've heard some people say that their father was an alcoholic and
Yeah.
abusive. So these people have never drank.
Right.
They choose not to drink because of the experience they had with their father, who was an alcoholic, and when he got drunk, he beat them. Okay? So we did that story with the Russian gentleman that became a
Yeah.
psychiatrist. His father was an alcoholic, and
Anton Chekhov.
yeah, and he beat him, and he became the exact opposite, and he forgave his father, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So absolutely, Mike, it's interesting,
Yeah. This was one quote, and we can wrap it up, that I thought was interesting. It said, "Learn to blend the analytical with the intuitive to be more creative." And I
Wow.
think that's the masculine with the feminine, the analytical being the masculine, and the intuition being the feminine. Going a little bit more with gut, insight, intuition. Um, I felt this applied to me, and I thought, oh man,
Let's see.
here's a quote. It said, "Look inward when you make mistakes." We're supposed to look inward when you make mistakes, and look outward when you have success. And I thought, oh, I don't always do that. When I make mistakes, I like to take the blame myself. But when I have success, I also like to take the blame. I like to take the credit.
The credit.
However, this is saying look outward when you have success. So inward when you make a mistake to learn, hey, what could I have done better? But outward when you have success, the people that helped you get there, the team, it wasn't all you.
No, it never is.
And that this is how you can control your ego. Well, I gotta say, this one was a bit challenging for me,
For me also.
to understand all the stuff that Robert Greene was getting into with their genders and all that. But I definitely learned, as I have with each chapter so far.
So it's interesting to me, last week we recommended the movie Frequency. I would recommend Forever Young.
Yeah,
They're old movies, guys and ladies.
maybe 90s or something,
Yeah,
from
they're
the
way old.
90s.
But they have a good message at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And in all of this, one of the things that I find that children have, okay, that keeps them energized and going is curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we can keep the curiosity alive through our years, I think that will be um, one of the things that will improve your life. One of the little things that because I was curious about something that led me to research about this class, and let me tell you, it took about a year for me to pull the trigger. If I would have had more guts and would have been braver, I would have started this course a year before this February 1st of 2024.
It's a big commitment. I remember when you enrolled for the first class, you let the family know, and it was a big deal for you
For me, it
because
was,
you're committing to certain days, time, and you wanted to, when you do something, do it right. And so it was a big deal for you.
well, I was scared to death because I was getting involved. I've never welded in my life. I've never done things related to this. And I flat out told the instructor, hey, look, I don't know anything.
And you have a good instructor.
I do. And I like him a lot. And he's brutal. He's
That's what
brutal.
you need.
Yeah, he tells you like it is. There's no flour in this with this guy. He lets you have it, and that's one of the things that I love about him. And he's messing with my mind all the time. I have to be on my toes. Yeah, he's throwing curves at me constantly.
That's good.
And I love it. He's a good man.
Anything else you want to throw in?
No, thank you.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks.